Hello friends, we are back with our second hangout, and today we are talking about backlog refinement. Many times when I interact with a lot of Scrum practitioners or the people who are learning about Agile and Scrum, they keep wondering that why don't we have a proper ceremony for refining backlog? How the backlog refinement should be done? Why don't we have a clear-cut prescription about do and don'ts of backlog refinement? And many times, since there is no very well-defined guideline for backlog refinement, people follow different type of practice as per their environment and as much they understand the importance of backlog refinement. So in today's session, what we want to do, we want to discuss some of the backlog practice. We talk about what is this product backlog is all about, and we want to figure out that how can we improve the backlog refinement process so that as a practitioner we face less issues while we are inside the sprint. So session will go like this. We have three panelists now. We have Sakshi, we have Shaikat, we have Ankit. So we will start with a brief introduction of all these panelists, and panelists can also put something which is coming from their experience, coming from their learning over the year of practicing Agile and Scrum, which can help audience to improve or take some clue for improving the backlog refinement practice. So just give a brief introduction and then talk about something which we can take away as a session output. So let's start with Sakshi.
Hi everyone, I'm Sakshi Mahajan. I've been into the IT industry for more than 10 years now, practicing Agile since more than 6-7 years, played multiple roles, product owner, Scrum Master, Agile coach. Today we are here to talk about the product backlog refinement sessions that we have. So basically, what exactly are these sessions for, and what actually is the goal for these sessions? In very short, I'll just to start with, I'll say that the basic goal of these sessions is that everyone has a better understanding of what work is to be picked up next. It's not about the current sprint that we're working on, but about what's coming up next, and also what are the impediments which or any dependencies which can actually stop from doing work in the next sprint. So we can discuss this later with everyone's introduction.
Okay, thank you, Sakshi. Anand, we got a question that he can't see anything moving here. I think you may need to refresh the Google Plus event. Once you refresh it, you should be able to see it. It's already live and we can see there are many viewers. So just try locally, maybe you check the link again. Okay, Shaikat, it's your turn now.
Yeah, hi everybody. I am Saikat Das, working into this industry for almost 15 years now. 8+ years experience in Agile in different roles, product owners, Scrum Masters, and currently work in scaled version of Agile. So add to what Sakshi has just mentioned, I would like to share some of the experiences and some best practices or customized practices that we've used for product backlog grooming. I won't go very detailed into what's the product backlog grooming process or refinement process. I believe that the people who are doing Scrum are aware of it. But some of the nuances which can bring optimization or have been helping me to do it better, would just like to share across the board. Thank you.
Great. Ankit, you can go ahead.
Yeah, hey everyone, my name is Ankit. So I have more than 7 years of experience in IT industry, and I've been playing the role of Scrum Master from close to 4 years now. So my agenda for session would be the same, to discuss the best practices, that what I've been doing, what I have done in my last projects, the best practices along around refinement, backlog refinement meetings, and also to learn new things.
Great. So we will talk about that the best practices related to backlog refinement. So before we get into the practices, let's define the product backlog. We have been talking about that product backlog should be deep, it should be detailed appropriately, it should be estimated, it should be emergent in nature, and it should be prioritized. So in a one line, if I ask you that beyond deep, if you just want to define what should be there or what kind of product backlog we should have. So if you have to define a product backlog in 1 or 2 line, how will you talk about an ideal or a good product backlog which team can use for their upcoming sprint or as well as for their current sprint? Maybe Sakshi wants to, yeah.
Okay, so product backlog is nothing but a group of all the user stories or the items, product backlog items, which need to be picked up by the team to build up the product. So anything and everything that needs to go into the product, any feature, any story that needs to be built up, has to be part of the product backlog. Now, the good attributes of the product backlog, as Sakit is asking for, can be, it has to be prioritized so that the team, when they start picking up the stories to work on them, they should know what is actually priority to the product owner. Because if the list is long, there can be anything that they can pick up. But if it's prioritized, they will know what is more important. Apart
Great.
from that, yes, it has to be detailed enough. It needs to have all the acceptance criterias, UX, UIs, whatever are needed for the team to pick up to be there. But upfront, it's not possible at all for the product owner to create a product backlog once and for all. It's not possible. So these product backlog refinement sessions help even the team to add information to it, and even the product owner to know what it needs to be added to it.
Great. Something Shaikat you want to add, like Saikat you want to add, that what is this product backlog, and in your view, what should be an attribute of a good product backlog?
So I will take a step back. Just will go a step back. What you mentioned, just to give one perspective to the listener. And so, what exactly a product backlog and how it starts? So product backlog is, as we have rightly mentioned, that it will be a list of items or laundry list that a product team or a development team would be working on for coming sprint or consecutive sprints. It starts from something which is called a product vision board, which could be as small as whiteboard having sticky pads into it where business come and put this product ID and then take it to product backlog. Product backlog item has, as we said, that we have a PBIs in the product backlog. So that can be from a user story or a very high level user stories. Normally, when the product owner write those or add into those, they try to follow a criteria called invest criteria, where we say that a PBI should be independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, and small, close to 40 to 50 hours of work, and then testable. So that's the intent product owner looked into when they detail down into product backlog item. But not always that criteria is meant. It can be a very high level. But when we get into the meeting, which we call a product backlog grooming meeting or product backlog meeting, sometimes it also happens in some of the smaller teams with a sprint planning as well. I mean, it comes very close to sprint planning. And there are various ways. I will discuss some of the essence and some of the varieties that we do in the industry. What we say is that during the backlog grooming process, the output should be having the product backlog item meet a criteria called DEEP, which is DEEP. As we say, it's like detailed appropriately, so that the PBI after the product backlog grooming has happened should have all the details in terms of how it is elaborated, all the acceptance criteria has been done. Then it should emergent. So when we say that we have detailed it, and suppose we are not able to take it into the immediate sprint, and we are taking it to the next to next sprint, it can be again be revisited and emerge because by that time, by a month or so, something new might have come in into that backlog item, and then it should be an estimable, like you can give a t-shirt sizing or normal high-level story point sizing and then estimate it that, because that also help when you scale up in an agile level or a scale up agile level to give you a predictability of your releases, because for a bigger project you need to do a sizing at that level also, and the sizes are confirmed when you get into the sprint. And then definitely you do a prioritization where you can use any technique for prioritization that you use, and that comes in. So the input, as I said, to a product backlog meeting should be a product backlog item which comes from a story report, and then this is what we get out of a product backlog meeting at a high level. So I will stop here, and then as we go more into what the process and how we do it, I will talk about it.
Yeah. So before I come to Ankit, I want to give you one more question, which is coming from Saikat conversation. That do you see, you may talk about what is your perception for a good product backlog, but what do you think about doing a backlog refinement as a part of a sprint planning or very near to the sprint planning? Because many times we find teams. Many teams practically doing backlog refinement as a part of a sprint planning meeting. Like they spend out of 4 hours, they spend 2 hours in refinement and maybe some time in planning. So you talk about what you think about product backlog, but do give some views on this particular question. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I was mute. Yeah, so yes, so I mean, as Sakshi and Saikar mentioned that product backlog, yes, it evolves. It actually happens when a product owner writes the user story. He gives first level of estimation there. So like what I have seen as per my experience, he estimates that in terms of big buckets, like whether it's like a small, medium, or large thing. And then when it eventually builds down, when it eventually comes to the product backlog grooming session, there what the team does, it actually estimates in further in further buckets, like in terms of, let's say if it's a large user story, they go ahead and discuss that user story. They see if it's following the invest criteria of it. I mean, if that user story is small enough, testable enough, all the acceptance criteria are written in order for that user story to be included in future sprints. If all these criteria are met there, once the criteria are met, all the open questions that the team has, they are discussed. Teams go ahead and estimate that. So we use planning poker for that. And to coming to your question, Saket, so what we do, or what I have seen in my projects, that we actually don't include we don't include product backlog grouping with the sprint planning. We don't club it together. So we do it once in a sprint. That's like a regular thing that we have set up. Once in a sprint for 2 hours. I mean, ideally it should be 10% of the team time should be spent. Ideally, it should be spent for product backlog grooming sessions. But as my team has matured, so we actually spend 2 hours every sprint for the product backlog grooming sessions. We discuss the items, we prioritize the items, we make sure all the open questions are answered. And then moving to the sprint planning session, now because these items they are already discussed in the grooming session, team has less questions. Means less questions to from the team product owner, and they spend less time there discussing it. If they still have any questions, yes, they can go ahead and ask the product owner, and then they go there and they do the third level of estimation there. That's in terms of task. So for me, as per my experience, there are three levels of estimation that we do. One that product owner does while writing the user story, and so usually he does it in terms of Excel, LMS, shirt sizing. Then at an estimation at grooming session, we do it in terms of Fibonacci series. We use planning poker for that, and then in the sprint planning session, we break down to tasks. So we don't club it together.
Okay, thank you. So let's take a further query from here, and I may come to Shaikat on this particular point. One thing is that do you have any particular case where you talk about that let's club these two things together rather than having separate? The another thing is that I understand from Ankit's response is that they are doing three levels of estimation. One level of estimation they are doing, a product owner himself is doing when he is thinking of a big epics. So he think of a big epic, he has a reference of previous epics. On the basis of those references, he categorizes them into a small, medium, large. Since this particular epic is not yet detailed enough, he just does that estimation and keep it with him. Once he starts thinking of that in a next 1 or 2 sprint, depending upon your time horizon, he wants to allocate part of this epic to the team, or he want team to be picking up on the basis of their capacity. He refines them further and take it an invest level and ask team to estimate using planning pokers. And at a third stage, when we get into a sprint planning, we estimate them into hours, and then we take it as a sprint backlog. So two questions. First question is that do you have any case where you feel that we can club the sprint planning and product backlog refinement? Second, do you think that product owner doing an estimation or at a higher level on his own can bring some problem or some advantage to a backlog refinement.
Yes,
right. So answering your first question.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Shaikat.
Uh, yeah, so I will answer one at a time. So the first one, as you said, right? Uh, do we do backlog grooming and sprint planning at the same point of time? Well, no. But there is a different essence which I said I'll talk about it, and it worked out in a way uh, that we say that we have implemented a different methodology. So I will talk about here is like where we have a 2 week sprint for one of the project that we have a 2 week sprint. So ideally from the industry ratio, what we have done, we have considered that we spend 2 to 6 hours or 2 to 4 hours, 4 hours in doing a backlog grooming, which is not part of the ideal sprint planning. But it also doesn't happen with this before the sprint planning. So what we do every day during the sprint, right? We called it something called backlog timeout time or time box time, which goes on for 25 minutes or 30 minutes every day. And we look into the backlog in a way that it's the next sprint and the 2 sprint from now. Anything beyond the next 1 or 2 sprint, so it counts 3 sprints, we don't even look into it. Product backlog can be updated by PO for those items, but we don't take into it. The way it is helped, right? So when we move across the sprint for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we go and discuss onto it. It becomes like a daily scrum, right? So when we join that meeting with a selective member, right, PO must be there, Scrum Masters is there, we have architect or the tech lead and selected 10 members. We ask, okay, what's new on the product backlog? So we discuss on it, we go into elaboration, we detail out, bring the stories in a smaller level or on a small, as we call, in sizable chunk, and then park it with PO. PO takes a day's time and go and update into the product backlog item and then groom it further. Right? This helps in a way that we are looking into the product backlog on every day. It actually saved a lot of time of our sprint planning. So now when we complete the 2 weeks of sprint and get to a sprint planning, which we used to take ideally as complete day of 8 hours, now we can complete it within half a day or 3 hours time, right?
Okay, so what I understand is that you are progressively refining the product backlog rather than doing it in a one big meeting. Great.
Right.
What about the second question?
So the second one was the product owner putting in the estimate. I don't support it, and in a way he can. So two part to it. So if I have a very scaled environment where I have to give a projection to a business, let's say I will take an example from when we did, right. We have to do a kiosk implementation across UK for the direct side. So business was asking for a timeline, and then we gave a high level estimate. So PU gave some estimate to it, which converts the entire project into 3 months, right? So if you go for 3 weeks or 2 weeks, in that many. But when we actually delivered it, right, it went up to 8 months, right? So we faced a lot of problem in that because the business was predicting and planning and went ahead and talked to the stakeholders on committing on the timeline of the delivery. But then when it actually come into the sprint, it was extended by almost double the time. So the way to avoid is now what we have done, right? So we go a level above than product backlog. We call it future story walkthrough. So the moment which we are talking about the vision board, the moment our thing come into vision board, we get engaged with the PO. We ask them that what are the high level stories to it. So let's say the overall scope might be around 40 stories, but at the higher level, the PO will give you 10-15 stories, based on which we give one t-shirt sizing, and that gives a level of estimate which is closer to it. It won't be 3 months, probably 5-6 months, and then 2 months extension here and there. But at least we have our technical expert, the Scrum Master, or the SOS who will handle the project, and UX and other team member engaged, so that we have a high level of estimate to it. So that helps rather than product owner giving the estimate on his own and then falling in a different note. So
yeah, great, Shaikat. I will give you a chance, Ankit, to speak. Before that, I just want to go to Sakshi and talk about two things. So one is the second question where we talk about a situation that product owner himself can compare 2-3 product backlog item, especially those are big, which are not planned for next 3-4 months. You can have a time horizon defined and give them some number as per their relative ranking. The second thing which is coming from Shaikat's explanation, which I'm interpreting, that he may be working in an environment where they have selective people participating in a higher level backlog refinement. So now, rather than a product owner himself doing, what I understand from his conversation is that they have defined set of people who play a role when the requirements are at higher level, and there would be a more stakeholder joining in, or say the complete team joining in once we reach more near to the development or the picking up of that particular product backlog item. So what is your view on this practice? One is that, okay, one person can define it. Another alternative where Saikat is talking about that we can have some selective individuals doing a refinement at a higher level, and then it can be groomed at a granular level.
Right. First thing I would mention is also about the question you asked first is when should it happen? It should be mid-sprint. Reason for mid-sprint is that we want that any things that are missing, any things that are missing before the next sprint starts need to be filled in. That's one of the reasons of having this backlog refinement meeting. Now we come to who. Now again, the when and the who match a lot because uh, actually ideally the whole team should be part of it because the work has to be done by the development team or even the UX UI people who are involved in it. So according to me, I'll suggest that the complete team, which includes the UX, the UI, any DBA, Scrum Master, Product Manager, everyone needs to be part of it. Now, the product backlog actually is owned by the product owner. In fact, even this meeting is led by the product owner. So apart from this meeting, the product owner can interact with anyone and any time when he wants. It's actually Scrum is more about the business and the technical people working together. So otherwise, it's the product backlog can be updated by the product owner, I would say, anytime. Whenever they feel they have the information, regarding it, it can be done anytime. But for the backlog refinement meeting, the goals of which are basically that the team and the product owner try to understand that are they comfortable with the next work that is there in the pipeline? Is the development team very clear that what it has to pick up in the next item? So that ways I won't suggest that the refinement sessions are done in silos or with different groups. The session should be done with everyone being there. This session has to be there before the sometime before the sprint starts, so that the product owner knows one that what are the details that are missing. The development team can help him know that okay, the acceptance criteria are not clearly defined, so how can we go ahead and work on them? They can mention that if some UX is not present, the UX person will know that he needs to work on it and is part of his priority. Estimations. Now, doing estimations, if the product owner does it at his level, it will be just according to his mindset. It won't include the technical difficulties that can come up when the development team starts working on it. So
Okay, yeah. Ankit, you want to put a final thought on it, because since this conversation started from you, so I would give you a chance to close it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I agree to what Sakshi said, but what I was referring to that when I'm saying that product owner writes user story and then he estimates his those use stories by himself. What I meant was he just tried to put those stories into buckets just to see if these are like epics, like how big this epic can be or how small this epic can be. And the other thing is the product owner. I mean, I have worked for a project where there was a product owner team. There was a whole team involved, and the whole team used to be present at the time of writing the user story. When initially, at the first time when product owner, when he was writing the story, including architects, business analysts, they were present there. They used to be present there. They used to sit down, discuss, and then write the story, and then try to put those stories into those buckets. So probably to an extent, that technical expertise was there as well in terms of architects, business analysts, or probably someone from the tech team so was part of PO team as well. So that was actually my idea of mentioning it. I have seen it happening, and I have seen it happening well. And just coming to the second question, whether to club, whether I have seen any instance where grooming or estimation session was clubbed or estimation happened at the sprint planning session? Yes, because there are few days in between the sprint planning and the grooming session, and at times people come up with different questions, or at times there are new requirements or new changes to the acceptance criteria, because of which the estimations can be changed. So while discussing those stories again in sprint planning session, if team thinks that okay, the complexity of the story or the size of the story may have gone up or down because of those things, they can actually group together and they can do a single round of sizing again for those stories.
Great. So a second point I want to discuss from my interaction with a lot of Scrum practitioner, people find it okay to think about that. Yes, there is a product backlog. It has collection of user stories, and user stories can be estimated using planning poker or etc. etc. But what about other items like Shaker talk about that product backlog has a full laundry list, whatever you want to do, it has a product backlog item, not necessarily all user stories. So if I have a technical work, if I have an improvement work, or a technical story or a spike story, how the estimation of that part of product backlog should be done, how the prioritization of that part of product backlog should be done. So, do you want to share a practice which you use to estimate a non-functional or say non-user story type of product backlog item? And anybody who wants to start can start.
So yeah, that's a good point, Saket, and it ties up to what I said. It's actually a laundry list, like when we say that's on the function list of items, that's not the right from Agile terminology. But there's a twist which I think we are getting question from audience. I just want to call it out. The PO for the technical stories and the PO for the product backlog rest of the story might not be same. In our case, it's actually different. When I move in on technical spike story, many of the time the chief architect or the architect of the team becomes the product owner for it. So it's him who is responsible for doing the backlog grooming of that activity along with the PO. Definitely the PO understand why it has been injected as a line item to the product backlog. From an estimation standpoint, we follow again referential estimation, or I mean or experience-based estimation that we say, where we consider that piece of work from what technical activity that we have done in past. However, if it's something a spike or implementation of a new technology which we have never done in past, like we did when we built a framework for kiosk, it was never there before, and it was integration with a kiosk framework, which is called KMF. So we have to do a lot of work across the industry, talking to the expert in the industry, saying that if you have to develop an application on chaos which integrate with KMF, what's the amount of time that you need for it? So again, expert opinion outside the organization, talking to the consultant, to the main company of KMF who writes the code, and talk to them and get it done. And hence, once the knowledge comes into the team across the sprint, we build up a knowledge base and take it from there. If it's an existing thing in the organization and the technology like Java J2E or .NET or anything that we have worked upon, we always talk to a different team or within the team and to get up the estimation for it. But there is a similar kind of estimation of planning poker that we do as we do for any functional story.
Great. Anybody wants to add to this particular point?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Ankit, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So same. I mean, talking about the technical spike, or for example, for that matter, let's talk about defects. So even what usually happens, even if let's say there are certain defects, there are 10 defects in a sprint or in the product backlog that have to be fixed. So what usually happens, we create a user story for them. Not a standard user story, but a user story, and we club those defects in that story as per their complexity, as per the feature they belong to. We try to club it, in a story, and then we estimate like the normal way. Like we use planning poker and we estimate it, and we take them into sprint planning session. Yeah.
Okay, Sakshi, do you want to add something, or enough has been discussed on this particular point?
Just one thing I wanted to add was what I find at the time of these meetings. Important thing comes up is splitting of the user stories. So what happens is at times the product owner has written, or his team has written one story which looks like, when the development team sees it, they don't feel that, one user story can fit into one sprint. So at that time, it is very important to let the product owner know that he needs to split it into multiple user stories, which can be picked up in the forthcoming sprints.
Okay, so this is something will lead to the second point, like how do we do splitting of stories. So
Okay.
let's talk about this. Before this, I want to talk about one more point: how big the product backlog should be. Like you may end up into a situation your product backlog is having 500 rows, 600 rows. So do you think that there should be a manageable WIP limit for a product backlog itself? Beyond that, a product backlog becomes too unmanageable because you may not recall all the items. So do you think that there should be some size limit, or do you find that a situation where product backlog grown beyond 150 line or beyond 120 200 lines and created some kind of problem or a chaos for you?
See, the product backlog needs to be extensive. It needs to have anything and everything that needs to be covered while development, which includes the spikes that have to be done, which includes the technical debt also, which needs to be fixed. So as and when the product grows, there is technical debt also that gets introduced. So anything and everything that needs to be done definitely has to go into the product backlog. Now it's the product owner and his team's responsibility to make it clutter free. By making it clutter free, what I mean is that it needs to be in proper hierarchy. There should be proper epics mentioned, features mentioned, and then the stories mentioned. It's difficult to put a limit to the items in it because it depends upon the size of the product. But anything, even in the technical debt, I feel needs to go into the product backlog, because it's only then can the team and the product owner know together that what all work is still left. It helps them estimate and have an idea about till when can they actually project to finish it.
Okay. Anybody else want to put something?
Yeah, I think what Shakshi mentioned is as one version of it we normally follow in traditional scaling of Scrum, but there's a new thing, a new side of it which is coming up or have come up with Scrum 1 on Lean, bit injected to Scrum. So to that, we definitely define some point in time WIP. Normally, you can follow the formula that we follow in Lean 2n-1, where n being the team which is responsible for the backlog grooming activity. However, saying that, I will again fall back to what Shakshi is saying, that it can be extendable, but when we define a limit, we say that how many of those items will be managed at that point of time. Some of the teams goes to an extent. I have one of the team where they say, unless that amount being moved to the next stage, but is ready to be worked upon, we won't add more to the product backlog. Some other teams say, no, we'll keep on adding to the product backlog, let's not put a pause to it, but this is a manageable chunk that we need to do. So how it gets healthy and help overall the organization and the product team, a new concept that has come in, which is called idea to cache or concept to cache. That if you want to measure, that helps over here, because if you don't have a control limit in terms of the idea and if you keep on extending, and then I would say that one of my idea is setting in the nth number of the position for so many days, and hence there is a wastage of stacking it for so many days. I would have spend that amount of time in doing the backlog grooming of some activity which could have gone to production earlier. So hence it has become very healthy in scaled agile. But when you fall back to a normal Scrum or probably a couple of streams working onto it, what Shakshi says definitely works for it. I mean, this is just from the scale agile terminal.
Okay, so this is looking good. I think we go ahead. I think more or less both of you are on the same track. It is more about how do we look at it. But yes, like many times I keep hearing from practitioners, like any items, if they go beyond 150, it becomes difficult to memorize it. So if you want to have it, may have and that's why the detail appropriate term comes into. Like it means the detail appropriate. I don't want to elaborate it till the time I'm reaching there. So it should be a good managed. So nice discussion. Now let's talk about splitting. Since Sakshi pointed out that particular point, that how should we do a splitting and who should do the splitting. So is it only the product owner who can visualize the splitting of the user stories, or we should involve our team and what kind of practices we should use? Can we give some checklist guideline which enforces a product owner to split the story into a smaller manageable chunks before they get prioritized for an upcoming sprint? So do you follow some guidelines, something to tell to your team about splitting, or how does it work?
Yeah. So generally splitting is done, at the time of product backlog, whenever we're having the backlog refinement or the backlog grooming meeting, when a new story is to be estimated. So generally a planning poker is used, and a Fibonacci series is what we generally go for. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. That's how we go. So anything which is estimated above 13 is generally considered complex enough to be picked up in one sprint. That's how we go. You can give it any number or any size that
Okay.
you feel as per the capacity of your team. And anything which is beyond that size needs to be splitted down into smaller stories. It's not only that it won't be finished in the story, but as the product owner splits it, it helps him to add more details to it. Now, with more details, better acceptance criteria, it gets a better understanding, and the team knows better how to work on it. So that is how we generally go about splitting the user stories. For an example, I'll give you, there was a user story that we had to build which needed a calendar widget to be added to a screen. So some planning screen needs to be created, and there was a elaborate calendar widget that had to be added. Now, adding a calendar widget was not easy because it's, technically speaking, it was something to be built using JavaScript, the jQuery tools and everything. So the team had to, even identify first. So first a spike was added. A spike was added because they had to identify the good JavaScript tools which will help them build a widget. Because why develop it from the scratch when why invent the wheel when there are so many good JavaScript tools available? So first a spike was added for it. Once the spike was done, so according to that one, a spike story was added, and then the other story that was added to implement it. The
Great.
spiking was needed to identify which tool we'll go for, and then the second one is when we'll add it. Or something like, you feel that a page is there, a web page is there which has a lot of operations needed. Maybe an add and an edit both are there. If it's small, you can keep an add and edit as one story. But if it's a complex page, you can keep add as one, edit as one, and even validations as another one, a separate one, as and
Great.
when required. So
Yeah.
these are the ways that can be used.
So what I understand is that you identified a size limit for a user story, and if that particular or a product backlog item, rather than using a term user story, and if that particular size limit was getting exceeded, then it's
Yeah.
a trigger for splitting, and people used various ways of splitting, like thinking about spike and development, or finding a data boundary type of splitting, like
Exactly.
insert, separate, etc. I think Ankit, you want to add something?
Right, yeah. So this is one of the way to do it. Yes. But usually what happens if the team is matured enough, and if we are following the backlog grooming sessions well, team is been practicing agile for a few years and been performing this ceremony for a while now. They actually discuss it in such a way that before going for the estimation, they come to a point whether this has to be split into another story or not. So I mean, yes, most of the times, even I have seen that. Okay, fine. When we play poker, when it goes beyond 13, we try to split. But if the team is matured enough, and if the vision is clear, or if the discussion of those user stories have been done well, then at times I have seen that we have splitted user stories on the basis of the value it is adding. So and that is at the discussion level, not at the estimation level. So it can happen at the discussion level as well.
Great. So the point which I'm driving from Ankit's discussion is that size is one of the trigger. The another trigger is are we clubbing 2-3 value points or a value dimension into a one story? And if they during the discussion, if they identified that yes, 2-3 values are getting clubbed into, and they may have a different priority, even though the size is still looking small, but still better to split it separately so that at least the higher priority work can go faster. So the great point. Great point. Now I want to put another question here. that when do we put an acceptance criteria to the product backlog item? Should it be attached as a part of a product backlog refinement session? Should it be attached while you are doing sprint planning, or should it be open even when the sprint is in progress, and product owner and team can discuss it inside the sprint and develop it? So what is your experience related to acceptance criteria's uh, attachment or identification with the product backlog item?
Right.
According
So,
to me,
as per my,
Yeah, go ahead and
go
give.
ahead, Sakshi.
Yeah.
so according to me, the acceptance criteria, in fact, the complete story which is being discussed at the time of product backlog refinement meeting should be complete in itself, at least as much as the product owner can do. So the acceptance criteria should already be present, because it's only the acceptance, if the acceptance criteria is present, will the team be in a shape to give it an estimate. Definitely at the time of sprint planning it should be there. If the acceptance criteria is not clear to the team at the time of sprint planning meeting, the team should not pick it up, because you don't know how many things will be added to it. How will you estimate it? So for me, it should be at the time of the refinement meeting. It is possible that when we are having a discussion in the backlog grooming session, that more acceptance criteria get added to it. That's fine. But at least the base work of the story should be done before you are picking that story up for the discussion.
So what I understand from your point is that you consider that acceptance criteria should be part of definition of ready
Yes.
in most of the cases, and the better we refine and attach them before sprint planning, the more predictable, more stable sprint we can have, so that there are less variations. Any difference of opinion from Sakshi?
No, there's no difference of opinion to what she said. Yes, so we should include it as a definition of ready before a user story is pulled into a sprint planning session. It should have the acceptance criteria ready. Yes, that's a valid point. Talking about adding acceptance criteria, or talking about having acceptance criteria, some part of acceptance criteria ready before backlog grooming session. To an extent, yes, because if there's a team, if there's a technical team who's writing user story, right, like I said, your team, including architects, BA, product owners, or maybe someone from the tech team, yes, they can define some high-level acceptance criteria there. And what I have seen in my experience, a day before, because we work in this distributed team, so we have distributed team here. So a day before, product owner, what he does, he sends out a notification to the entire team. Okay, guys, we are meeting tomorrow at so and so time for backlog grooming session. These are the items that I mean, just go ahead and look at the rally, or whichever tool it is, and these are the items that we could probably be discussing tomorrow. So what the team does, they just have a look at those items in, you know, in advance. So when they go to the grooming session there, they can discuss those acceptance criteria as well, and they can add acceptance criteria there, and then move on to estimation. So yes, to me, a high-level acceptance criteria probably should be there before going to the grooming session, and yeah, and further can be added by discussion.
In
Okay,
fact,
so
this is a very good tip, you know, that the team should spend just a few minutes at the product backlog before any of these meetings that we have, because as Ankit is saying, if the team knows, they can come in with their inputs. So if we are prepared, if we are done with our homework, these meetings will never, you know, be very long, and they can be time boxed, which is, you know, very important for everyone, because everyone starts feeling irritated and bored when the meetings go on and on and on. So we need to time box them, definitely.
great. So just a request to audience, if you have any query, so there is a Q&A app. If you have logged into a Google Plus, you can see a Q&A app, and you can type your question there, and we will take those questions in our conversation. As of now, we don't have any, so please put your questions there. We still have 15 minutes left for this particular interaction, so we will take them during this session. Now extending the point which was related to an acceptance criteria, many times I face this question, and people keep struggling while they are implementing or using Scrum, that they have a resistance of about a modification in acceptance criteria, or a change in acceptance criteria when the sprint is ongoing. So should we lock the stories before we get into the sprint? Because if we have defined them ahead, if we have discussed them during sprint planning meeting, now should we work with the perception that they should not be changed when we are inside the sprint? So can we
I,
change the acceptance criteria?
I think if that is the perception, then that kills the whole concept of agility. So if we are trying to being agile, are saying that okay, we are on, we are accepting changes even late in the cycle. So what happens I mean, at times, yes, it happens that when team starts working on a particular sprint item, on any particular user story, they realize that okay, fine, these are the things that should have been added in the acceptance criteria. What they can do, they can discuss it with the product owner. Ultimately, I think it has to be discussed with product owner, and once they all agree, I think they can go ahead and add it uh, as one of the acceptance criteria. It can be changed.
Okay, so anybody wants to oppose it, because many times the team may think that the change will spoil my sprint planning, the change will spoil my velocity, the change will spoil my complete thing. Any point towards that?
I would say ideally it should be logged. Everything should be logged. Once the sprint has started, there should be no change allowed in the sprint. It should only be allowed in lieu of another story. So if something needs to be added, the team should be able to switch a story with the other. But in case of acceptance criteria, what happens is at times it's too small. It is just a small change that needs to be done. Suppose a validation is being added, another one gets added which is very similar to it. So it depends more upon the team, that are they ready to pick up that change within the same sprint. It has been scenarios where we felt that okay, though it's just related to the story and an acceptance criteria in it, but if we add it now, it will be, the estimate will change a lot. So what we generally do at that time is we suggest the product owner to add a new story into the backlog, which can be picked up in the next sprint. And if
Okay,
it is
so
very urgent,
yeah.
if it is very urgent for the product owner to get it done in this sprint, then we swap it. Swap a user story. Okay, then we are not doing one of the user stories that we committed for. That ways.
Now, I take this question further to Saikat. Many times we keep talking about, when we talk about sprint, that we should not be changing the sprint goals once we start it. But nobody says that beyond sprint goals, because if you are changing one acceptance criteria, it may not change the sprint goal. So you are not changing the sprint goal, but you are just refining one point from here and there. And as a product owner, I could not think everything ahead. Once I start working with the developer, then I got an idea that there should be a small change. So what is your take on keeping flexibility on acceptance criteria during the sprint?
I
Second,
think,
yeah.
yeah. So I think it's pretty much aligned to what Sakshi and Ankit mentioned. Right? Ideally, technically, we should be locking the scope. But again, when we are working for fast-paced applications like online e-commerce and things, there's certain stuff that gets changed in between, where the product owner himself is not aware of that it would change, or when we see the output or the first level of show and tell, or the review that they do, they see that it's not the way that we're going to look into it. We did some similar project where we were gifting flowers to the site. So a small thing like there was a feature of showing a gift message for the flower, where everybody can put a gift message to it, and it was a requirement that we're working on to it. But while we're working on the flow, it appeared, and it was somebody consulted from the domain team with the project owner. They said that when we send, some of the hospitals in UK, they don't allow gift message to be tagged with flowers, right? So the goal of the sprint was, a major goal of the sprint to have flower sellable with a gift message tagged to it, so that I can be launching it for the Valentine's Day. That's what we did this year. But then this angle came in when he said that we can't do that for the hospital, for some of the hospitals, based on the postcode, right? So one thought process was like what Sakshi said, that ask the PO to add a new story to be taken this in the next sprint. And but the other part was, right, there was a commitment to the client or to the business saying that we will be launching this application with the bare minimum implemented. So we had to take a call where we did a trade-off in terms of UX layering or the beautification of the part, where we said that some jazziness which was tied up with flower, which would make the page looking more beautiful. We cut it down. We said that we'll commit to the next sprint and do it of the sprint and factor that in. Mind it, this requirement was not there anywhere when we did the backlog grooming or the sprint planning. But we as a team for the organization, for the product, for the launch, we took the decision and fit it into over there. That's one way we do it. Other way, when we see it coming very probably by the end of sprint planning or very close to the sprint start, we say that we will take it as a stretch goal where the team doesn't have any business commitment of delivering into it, and based on how we progress and if the velocity permit, we pick it up or we take to the next sprint. This is the two way that we have handled. Either do a trade-off or I do a stretch goal. And if it's like very vague, doesn't fit into the Moscow criteria, and then you just come into it, we say like, let's not discuss about it. Let's go to a next sprint and into it. So, couple of ways that we handle. Yeah.
Great. So what I take from this particular conversation is it's a depending upon the context, depending upon how big the impact is. So it's not like that very hard and fast rule, but yeah, we need to keep the goal intact. We want a team to achieve what they have committed for. We don't want to disturb them much, but at the same time, if there is a need, there is a need of adjusting some of the acceptance criteria in order to meet the commitment which the team has done. Team should be thinking about it, and it depends upon the context also when this particular event is happening. If it is happening near to the closer, you may think of it's just a matter of 3 days. Let's talk after the sprint is what. Great point. Another query which I am putting it, that many times when we talk about prioritization, should the complete product backlog is prioritized? Like for example, if I have 150 items, should I have a priority to all the 150 items, or is it okay to have a prioritization of first 40 and remaining can just lie that okay, they will come after 40? So how do you take this prioritization in practice?
Right. So talking about the prioritization, as we discussed that in grooming sessions, what we target to cover at least 3 sprints. What we try to do, we try to make sure that before this next sprint happens, before the items they reach to their sprint, at least one more backlog grooming session happens in between, so that if team had any questions for those items, in the first session, I mean there's at least, let's say, a sprint gap in between for those items. So we try to estimate it for like 2-3 weeks. We don't try to go whole of the lot, because that will probably not make that much sense. Priorities may change, because values for those items may change with time over a period of time. So it's probably a wastage of effort to do the estimation upfront for all the items. But yes, we try to focus for at least 3 sprints, or let's say, and then when we move on to those sprints, we try to see if priorities have changed, or are there any new additions, are there new changes, and so on and so forth.
Great. I think Sakshi, you were saying something, but you were muted that time.
What I was saying was that yes, as Ankit is saying, very similar to it. At least the items which have to be picked up in the next sprint, or some more than that, should be prioritized. Definitely, it's not possible to exhaustively prioritize everything, because it keeps changing again for the product owner also. So it's just waste of time. The max he can do is to do it for a release if he's identified what stories have to be worked on, even if they're not detailed enough, he can prioritize them, that what features first and what features later.
Great. So what I take from this conversation is it's all about identifying a last responsible movement, because we keep talking about in a lean and agile that we should not be doing too much ahead planning, because situation is going to change. So identify a last responsible movement, and according to your last responsible movement, you prioritize that, or you refine the product backlog. So let's not limit only about prioritization, but refinement, like even the splitting of the user stories, even doing a refined level of estimation for them. And again, the prioritization also goes there. Good. And anything you want to talk about as a closing comment? So all three. So what one should consider when they start thinking about practicing backlog refinement well, so that team can deliver fast, more predictable.
I would like to add that definitely this ceremony, though it's not very strictly followed by everyone, the product backlog grooming or refinement, or even we call it as storytelling at times, when the product owner needs to tell or explain a new feature that will be added in the future sprints. So this kind of meeting has to be there within each sprint, or if not required in each sprint, at least in every alternate sprint, it needs to be there. This helps. There are definitely a lot of advantages that before the sprint starts, everyone has a lot of clarity about what is coming up next. They're not just sitting and waiting for anything. Any missing item which is stopping from to start the next sprint is caught beforehand. Any dependency on any other team who's working on some things that we need, maybe some like technically talking, some services that are being already built which we need to use, something like that, if missing, is identified on time. And definitely this increases the productivity, as we are clear there are no confusions at the time of sprint planning. Also, just to maximize the value of these meetings, I would say we should keep it short, not let them go on and on forever. To do that, be prepared, as we've already discussed, and all the participants try to be there, so that they can provide their inputs, and no one comes up with a surprise at the time of the sprint planning. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think the crisp note from him, right? The backlog grooming, the team, as I see to it, and I call it, they should be very proficient and prepared to ask 5 WH questions: what, how, why, when, and who, and that should appear in the user stories and acceptance criteria. So if each PBI item that we are doing a backlog grooming are not satisfying these 5 questions, we don't call it as a complete PBI, right? Just a step back, and I think when we discuss on acceptance criteria, I believe, and it has proven for all the projects that I've handled, when I go for a product backlog grooming exercise, the story should have a certain level of acceptance criteria. Any story that comes into product backlog grooming activity without acceptance criteria, we say it's rejected for the time being. Unless you come back with some acceptance criteria, even at high level, it's not considered as a candidate for product backlog grooming activity. So some of the things that we follow as a best practice.
Great. So for W1H, and even having a definition of ready for backlog grooming, like when can the story can be considered coming into a backlog grooming session. Great. Ankit?
Too strict, but it helps. So.
No, great. Yes, Ankit?
So pretty much already covered by Saket and Sakshi. So just to add on to that, I feel it's all about the discussion. It's all about how well you can ask questions. I mean, whether it's backlog grooming session or sprint planning session, it's all about asking questions to the product owner. It's all about having that good discussion, effective discussion among your team members, including opinion of even a QA, even if it's not involved in the development work, for example, or a UI guy. Even including them into the discussion may eventually lead to adding more acceptance criteria, as you can say, or splitting the stories into other ones, or adding new dimensions to the stories. So it's all about the discussion. And the Scrum and the product owner actually should take a lead on it. You should try to send the agenda, not the agenda, but try to send the list of the items that will be discussed in the next session a day in advance, so that you can get a chance of like 15-20 minutes to go through it. So it's all about the coordination and having that discussion. That's it.
Great. So it should be a well managed, well prepared, advanced, expectation communicated meeting. So if the product owner expect you to come prepared and gives you enough indicator to come prepare by way of showing some direction, helps in organizing and keeping the meeting on time. So great. So we are also meeting our on time thing. So it's exactly 1 hour, and I think I'm good to close this particular session. And we will try to have another hangout in 2-3 weeks time. And yeah, we are a bit busy in organizing our teleconference, which is happening on 13th June. So a lot of the NCR people, including me and Ankit, are involved in making this particular session good, or conference good. We are getting good responses from the speakers. So we already have 25 proposals. We got PMI as a sponsor, Ankit. So now Scrum Alliance as well as PMI are on board, and we are trying to make this as a great event. So thanks for joining in, and stay connected. You can use Twitter to keep sharing extended thought on your product backlog grooming. I posted some queries based on the conversation which we were having. So you can keep talking about it, and do keep visiting our discussagile.com, and I will come up with the new topic and the schedule soon. Thank you. Thanks for joining.
Just one point, I think there
Yeah.
are some questions, and people are asking you that whether you'll speak them not. Probably we can take those and answer offline, because I think 2 or 3 questions are there. And
Where?
I can see it when I click the questions. It was coming up. Three are there. 3 questions are there.
Okay. I also just saw it before this. Okay.
So Brijesh
Yeah.
the question not being seen. So I think.
I think yes. So we missed seeing these questions somehow. I think the folder was closed even in my indicator. Yes, Neeraj and Nishant. Sorry, we could not see these questions. I think we will answer them offline on Twitter. I think some part of it is already covered during the session, especially the Brijesh and Nishant one. Thanks, Saikat, for pointing them out. Let's talk about these questions on Twitter. Yeah, so just follow hashtag Discuss Agile. You will get the responses. Yeah, thank you, Saikat. Thank you for pointing this out. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.